Recently, we met Hillel, who came from the Jewish community in Babylon to study in Jerusalem. Hillel became a renowned and influential scholar who taught us many things like Im einani li nili, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? But if I am only for myself, what am I? And he was also prepared to occasionally adjust the rulings in the written Torah if they were not achieving the fairer society they were intending to, most well known being the famous prosbul. But when Hillel first arrived from Babylon, he was so poor he nearly froze to death in a snowstorm when he was on the roof trying to listen to a lecture through the skylight. Do you remember I told you about that? Some of these stories are recorded in the Mishnah, the first written record of what we now call the rabbinic period, though they were written down over 100 years later in about 200 of the Common Era. In the Mishnah, we also find a story about Hillel's colleague, Shammai, and a roof. But in this story, Shammai, known as Shammai the Elder, is already a well-known scholar working with Hillel. Hillel and Shammai were the two great teachers and leaders of the Jewish community in Judah under King Herod and Roman rule, and they ran the Jewish high court called the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem. Hillel was elected as the president of the Sanhedrin, while Shammai worked under him as the head of the Beth Din, or chief justice. It was a time when the Romans occupied and controlled the land of Israel, and Shammai was concerned that if the Jews had too much contact with the Romans, the Jewish community would be weakened. His strict interpretation of Jewish law tried to keep the Jews away from the Romans. At the festival of Sukkot, Shammai had a new grandson. And he's so keen to make sure that the baby spends time in the sukkah, but he makes a hole in the roof of the room where the baby is and puts greenery over it to make it into a sukkah. The tradition tells us that he was a builder, so presumably he knew how to do this safely. Hillel was more lenient in his view of the law than Shammai. You should have looked at the text from the Mishnah, which tells us about his daughter-in-law giving birth and him opening up the ceiling and putting schach on top of the bedposts for the baby. Hillel was more lenient in his view of the law than Shammai. Shammai liked an argument and could be easily angered. There's a famous story of a man who said he wanted to convert to Judaism, but would only do so if a rabbi could teach him the entire Torah while the man stood on one foot. He went first to Shammai, who, insulted by this ridiculous request, threw him out of the house. And then the man went to Hillel. Hillel accepted the challenge and said, "What is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor." That is the essence of Torah. The rest is the explanation. Now go and study it. Shammai seems to have realized the disadvantages of his temper, and he recommended a friendly attitude toward all. Shammai's motto was, "Make the study of Torah your chief occupation. Speak little but accomplish much, and receive everyone with a friendly countenance." Only 3 fairly minor disputes on points of law are recorded between Hillel and Shammai themselves, although, as we will see, the disciples of the schools they established, the school of Hillel and the school of Shammai, amplified the different approaches of their teachers and disagreed on very many issues.